A very common accessibility issue on websites is improper color contrast ratios. Take buttons, for example, one person may be able to read like a blue button with pink text on top just fine, and others may have a harder time, or someone could even have a visual impairment, which makes finding those color contrasts and being able to read them more difficult. There is an exact formula for how to measure your color contrast ratios to make sure that they pass. The passing score is a 4.5 ratio, and that's the minimum you want to aim for. This makes sites good not only for people, but good for SEO. Google factors in scores like accessibility into their ratings. Google Lighthouse is a really good tool for checking a site's overall performance and accessibility. I'll link that in the description. But in this video, I want to show you easy tools to address this when you're creating brand guidelines, building out a brand, or building out web pages. So I've come up with an example here. I'm going to pretend that this is my brand. If I am bringing this into my website, I want to make sure that the colors I'm using, for example, this green or this blue, have this contrast ratio. And the easiest way to do that is to go to something like 8 Shapes, which I can go to here, up our color palette once we put in our codes here. So scoot that over so you can see. So I've already gone in and pasted in the hex codes for the color palette that is shown here. So this grid appears and we have some tools that we can toggle on and off. So first we want to show all of the color combinations that pass, that have that 4.5 or above number assigned to it. And if I turn on DNP, which means does not pass, we can see that most of these color combinations here don't pass accessibility. So 1.2, super low, 1, super low, 1, super low, you can't see that at all. Even this, which is surprising, this white text on this green background, for me on my screen with my eyes, that looks fine, but it actually has a really low score. And so by turning this on and off, you can see how your colors are ranking. Now, this is an example of a palette that really is a super limited palette. I can only use plain white text on top of this teal color or the teal color on top of plain white text. That doesn't give us a lot of options when we bring these colors into design. If we want to have this like peach background, or if we're thinking about buttons, what colors we want to use on top of each other, we really only have this option. I have this third option that you can turn on, which is AA18, and this gives you a little bit of a rating increase just because if you use it at a size 18 font, you could get away with this, but they're still not very strong numbers. So I'm going to turn that off. I don't really like to use that one, but it is there. So what can we do? First, you can revise your palette. If you are starting from branding and you're a brand designer, you can use this tool to make sure that your brand colors automatically kind of pass these ratios. But if you're designing a site with a brand already established, then we have a couple different options. I like to use the tints and shade generator, and we can link all of this. It's maketintsandshades.com. You put in your hex codes and then it gives you all of these different values. So we're still remaining on brand with the color palette, but we have some different options to choose from. If we go back to my little example here, I have already picked out some. These were just kind of random tints and shades that I liked, that I still felt were cohesive with this palette, and I felt like I wanted to use on the web. So I'm going to take these hex codes here, and then I'm just going to paste them back into that 8 Shapes tool that we were using before. So over here on the side, I'm going to hit enter and then paste those back in. Now we can see our grid gets a little bit more complex. We have lots of different options, and this color right here was a great one because now we can use almost all of our colors on top of it. Our green is still pretty limited here, but now we can use this dark green, and this still is cohesive. It's still within the color palette. And again, you can play with these tints and shades to find stuff that really works. You can play around with it as much as you like, even increasing, to 10, 20%, or going, really dark can help you find colors that you can use on top of each other. So I know this looks a little confusing, but just remember, if you are seeing this, all of the things with red means they don't pass that test, and so you can just turn those off, and that way you can only see the ones that do pass. So those are the ones that you can use. A really great tool that I found is called the Color Palette Builder, and now this is a paid tool. I paid for it once. I think it was like $70 or $90. But if you plug in all of your colors into there, so here are, I've already set it up, I've plugged in our original colors, but we can add in the colors that we decided on to extend our palette. So let's go in and add those. I'll just click on add color, and then I can color drop it, add color, color drop, add color. It's really easy to do this. which is why it's one of my favorite tools ever. Add color and get our dark green. And then you can give these names, but you'll see the hex codes here. I've already named these, but we could name those if we wanted to. So then I'm going to go ahead and show, well, first I'm going to test all pairings. So these are all the possible combinations of every color on top of every background, and it's a lot. You'll notice that only some of them have the check mark, and those are the ones that pass the accessibility test. So we can filter there. We'll just go to show compliant pairings. And then now we have a palette that we can use on our site. So these are all the different options that do pass that test. It's the same thing as 8Shapes, but it does just show you in a different way. And it's a little more easy to understand how this palette comes together. And then if I click on show palette, it'll show me all the colors, the names that I gave them in the hex code. And then if you click on select all, we want to select all of them there. And we do show palette again. Now you can see this. This is exactly what I showed you before. These are all of the different pairings on top of each other. And then I can save this as a URL, or I can even export it for a client or to reference later. So again, this is a paid tool, but it is really helpful if you are struggling to kind of come up with pairings, or you want to export something to a client, or you just want to test a brand palette and you want to see how things are looking and how things will stack on top of each other. Again, this is just for the web. Print is totally different, but it is really helpful. This again impacts your overall SEO score. So you want to make sure that, especially for things like buttons and main titles, you know, your H1, H2, H3, that all of this passes the accessibility test. So I hope this was helpful. I will put links to these in the bottom of this video. Let me know if you have any questions.